Sumo of the Opera is one of those episodes that has always lived purely rent-free in my head. I know that Veggie fans always have that one episode or two that always sticks with them scene for scene or line for line, regardless if that specific episode was even their favorite. That's the case for me in this instance. I will always have Larry Boy and the Fib from Outer Space ranked as my number one, but this episode from the Silver Age is burned into my very childhood memory for all the best reasons. Even though the Golden Age of VeggieTales will always have the most superior shows from the whole series, I think that the Silver Age has some of the best shows. Sumo of the Opera is one of those instant classics that I immediately think of, which is kind of funny because whenever I bring this show up to anyone who has a small association with VeggieTales, they always go, I don't know that one. And then all I say is, you know, the one with the terrifying possessed song. My point being that this episode in the fandom is not really the first episode that people will always go to in their heads when they think of VeggieTales. But for me, this episode is one of my favorites of all time, and I'm going to give a thorough review on why I absolutely love this show, highlighting all the strengths, the memorable moments, and all the sorts of details that stood out to me. So strap on your pianos as we dive into VeggieTales Sumo of the Opera. First thing I want to cover is that in most VeggieTale episodes, we get really fun countertop sequences as the introduction for the story. We fade in from black and typically see Bob and Larry introduce us with their opening lines and then get started with the main premise of the show, intermixed with some fun comedic banter. And while I think there are so many great comedic bits in every countertop scene, I think Sumo of the Opera's countertop intro takes the cake as the absolute funniest intro in the whole series. Like I said, we fade in from black to the countertop, but instead of seeing Bob and Larry side by side, we have a close-up shot of Bob weirdly smiling straight into the camera. At least that's what I always thought. This discussion might lead me down to a separate rabbit hole, but bear with me. If anyone watching this video has any experience watching film criticism, especially when it comes to animation, then you might have heard the term uncanny valley. The uncanny valley started as a term used in the field of robotics and artificial intelligence to describe the phenomenon where a robot or animated character closely resembles a human, but still has subtle differences that make it appear eerie or unsettling to human observers. This effect occurs when the robot or character is almost but not quite realistic enough to be convincing, leading to the feeling of discomfort or unease in those interacting with it. And I think this very much applies to the genre of film, since the creators who make their stories need relatable characters that viewers can connect with, whether it's through their actions, characteristics, design, or expressions, regardless if they're humanoid or inanimate objects. But the uncanny valley definitely applies to the medium of animation depending on how characters are shaped or created. And this might be a hot take, but I think VeggieTales had some of this in every show now and then. If you guys saw my VeggieTales retrospective video, then you'll know that VeggieTales was basically one of those biggest pioneers that brought 3D animation into what it is today. So it makes perfect sense that lots of these shows in the catalog would have some of these strangely rendered characters or designs, since Big Idea was one of the first animation companies to dive into this new territory, with hiccups and all. Lots of people I talk to who are Veggie fans always have a show that scared them when they were younger. Sometimes it would be a few Larry Boy episodes with some pretty intentional dramatic characters, which makes sense to me since those were purposefully made to be a bit more intense since they were riffs on the superhero genre. But then you also have some lighter episodes that still have bizarre imagery that could easily scare a kid. And Sumo of the Opera was the epitome of this for me. Like, why is Bob staring at me like that? Why are you smiling like that? Anyway, we are introduced to the show and Bob tells us that Larry is away on a toy drive helping out some kids. Now you might be wondering why that the writers decided to leave Larry out of the opening countertop scene. Well, I will tell you why. It was for the one and only purpose of introducing this little piece of freaky fabric.
Hello, I am Lutfy, the kindly teensy weensy cucumber.
Lutfy. The little sock puppet was originally intended to be a lovable and endearing character, but his appearance inadvertently turned out to be quite creepy. His button eyes were meant to convey innocence and charm, but instead they just scared the living daylights out of me. Despite the creator's best intentions, Lutfy's appearance to me was unintentionally unsettling, leaving many to wonder if there was something more, sinister lurking beneath his colorful exterior.
Hello,
I am Lutfy, the kindly teensy weensy cucumber.
Lutfy knows a story about perseverance. Hello, children. I am friendly and I am kind. And I am teensy weensy.
I don't know if anyone else feels like this, but I have always felt this way towards this character. As far as a design point goes, it's so weird looking. I hate this thing. It's so scary. I can't do this, guys. But it's really ironic too, because I actually think he's really funny, especially when he's having his back and forth with Bob while talking to Larry on the phone. But then we also get introduced to the theme of the whole show, which is perseverance. And I think that this is one of the best lessons Big Idea has tackled for one of the shows, because it's very relevant for anyone at any point in time. Perseverance is a timeless lesson that resonates with individuals of all ages. Whether it be overcoming personal obstacles, pursuing a dream, or simply navigating the ups and downs of everyday life. The lesson of perseverance teaches us that setbacks and failures are not the end of the road, but rather opportunities for growth and learning. By staying committed to our goals and pushing through adversity, we can achieve great things and inspire others to do the exact same. And I really think that this powerful lesson serves as a guiding light for individuals of all ages, reminding us that with perseverance, anything is possible with God's strength. And Larry explaining his exhaustion in his passive-aggressive tone is just so hilarious. Lutfy intervenes and insists that he can put on a show that conveys the message of perseverance in a strong manner. And we get introduced to our first official segment of the show, which is Going Up. And I really love this short. This is a silent film in the tradition of Laurel and Hardy. Basically, the whole premise is just seeing Larry, Jerry Gord, and Mr. Lunch trying to haul a piano up this gigantic over-the-top mountain. And in classic VeggieTales fashion, wacky hijinks ensues to our main characters in every way possible. This segment is really great just because it's not taking itself too seriously and just having enough fun with it at the same time, while also having lots of self-awareness of what it's trying to be. And the music makes this whole thing come to life, not only because it follows each beat of every comedic movement, but the music is even more in the spotlight because the characters deliberately do not speak any dialogue. This is definitely more of a nod to the silent film era like Charlie Chaplin, but apparently this whole segment was originally supposed to be colored black and white, as a full-on parody to those 1940 films. But later the team at Big Idea decided to put the color back into its original form. Maybe to hold the younger audience's attention more, which I can understand. Also, these little black and white cards showing the actual words the characters are saying is so funny. But I think it's made even funnier because Jean-Claude and Philippe are over there in the corner just shouting out the obvious statement of what the card is saying. The piano must go up. Mike Naraki and Phil Vischer only shouted out the P's lines because they realized that a lot of their young audience couldn't read yet. I also like that despite how silly and over the top this segment was, it's still connected with the lesson of perseverance in a lighthearted way. We then fade in from black once again to my personal favorite silly song of all time, Schoolhouse Polka. And it honestly might just be for the most biased reason possible. I grew up with this one, and I had it on the most rewatches. I love how simplistic this song is right down to the way it's shot. Only focusing on one static wide shot and then just a few close-ups. Nothing dynamic or crazy happening, just an animated cucumber who is going off the rocker and extremely passionate for the English language. It honestly kind of reminds me of a big throwback to the very first silly song, the Water Buffalo song, just in regards of how it was also shot the same way. Also, fun fact about the design of Larry's teacher outfit. Apparently the design is a full-on replication of what Mike Naraki's school teacher looked like, and he based this whole design off of him, which I think is just amazing. And hey, my English grammar did in fact skyrocket after this. After hearing the most insanely adjective-heavy sentence ever in my life, you better believe that when I was in English class and we had to write short stories, my characters had the biggest, bluest, cleanest, brightest, quickest, newest, roundest, nicest, softest, tallest, toughest, slightest, smoothest, kindest, flattest, tightest, most amazing words you've ever seen. After the silly song, we cut back to Lutfy, who is wondering if Bob has found a story yet. Unfortunately, Bob is still looking and he asks if Lutfy can buy him some more time. Why does Lutfy have a creepy gut just poking out like that? And I hate it. Is it actually just me, or is Lutfy the most eerie, uncanny thing in this world? In a world full of talking vegetables. I really don't know what to feel about this guy. Because Lutfy is really funny, but also weird and scary looking. We have a complicated relationship. We move on to the next segment of the show, which is a retelling of the story of St. Patrick. This is a flannel graph narrated by Lutfy, and it traces the true story of St. Patrick retold in 2D animation, retelling all of the most significant events of Patrick's life from England to Ireland. From a slave, to running away, being trained in church, to go back to be a missionary in Ireland. This is the one segment in the show that feels kinda out of place. It's not necessarily the medium that distracts me from going from 3D veggies to 2D humans. I think it's more that it just has to do with a sudden switch in tone, which is really sort of a departure from the whole perseverance message. It's the only part of the show that feels like we kinda screeched to a halt and changed genres and pacing out of nowhere. But for what it is, I still really like it. The story of St. Patrick is very powerful, and it really shows you how this was the guy that really made it his mission to spread the gospel beyond the Roman Empire. There is much more digging you can actually do to look into the actual story of St. Patrick, and a lot of it is pretty intense. But for what the team at Big Idea put out was a good effort, and I still think that this little segment stands out in a good way in the whole vast sea of the veggie history. It shows kids a glimpse of church history and hopefully inspires them to look into it more one day. This segment is really— oh my gosh, that was the most intense jump scare of my life. Why did he just pop out like that? He couldn't have done it any other way. Oh my word, this little sock is gonna be the end of me. Anyway, Bob finally finds a story that leads us into our main segment, which is also the main title of the show, Sumo of the Opera. This story is an inspiration of Rocky and a little bit of Karate Kid wearing the shell of the Mikado, which for those who don't know is a Japanese musical created by none other than Gilbert and Sullivan. Which for those who don't know, Gilbert and Sullivan are these crazy, really cool composers. I really recommend looking them up. They're awesome. And you can definitely identify that right down to the aesthetic of the show itself. The way how the shots are framed makes it feel like a full-on stage production shot for television. All the characters are dressed like 1800s Japan with the long robes and of course, with the long tied black hair slicked back. I also really love the intentional cardboard cutout designs for the sets for the background. Overall, this show really nails its design and tone despite the odd mix of genres thrown together. The main premise of the story is about a character named the Italian Scallion, which is the most WWE name I've ever heard for a VeggieTales character. Played by Larry the Cucumber, Apollo Gord is the champion sumo wrestler that is supposed to be challenging a Mr. T look-alike potato. The Italian Scallion is his sparring partner. But while being a silly goober, Scallion causes Mr. T to injure himself. In the meantime, we learn that Scallion was supposed to fix Hadrian's bicycle, so Scallion offers to fight Apollo. Paul Grip decides to help train him, Scallion goes into training, but proves it's difficult. But Scallion gives up, until Hadrian shows that he has faith in him and looks up to him. This causes Scallion to train in true Rocky fashion, with an epic montage doing all the work. During the fight, Apollo is unable to push Scallion outside the ring as fast as he bragged he would. And they end up in a tie. Scallion fixes Hadrian's bicycle and they all learned a valuable lesson. First thing that I really want to highlight is the music and the score. The music is phenomenal, as it always is with Kurt Heineke, composing the music once again for the show. He nails every kind of genre that this segment is parodying. You have your big operatic songs with a full-on men's choir accompanied by Middle Eastern instruments. Apparently, this was one of the few shows Kurt didn't have much time to work on since he was really busy with other previous installments. But you wouldn't even be able to tell, because this score is just flawless. I just love the homage to some of the themes from the Mikado, which truth be told, I didn't even know what the Mikado was until I discovered the behind the scenes of the show. And not only that, but this episode is just layered with so many genres of music like polka, Irish music, opera, 80s rock. It's just crazy seeing all of these awesome scores being fully integrated into a huge melting pot of an episode, which in the end really works for me. The characters are also really nicely fleshed out. I will always love any role played by Larry, but the character of the Italian Scallion is a special one for me. Right next to Larry Boy, one of the biggest reasons for this is nostalgia, but the second reason is I love the simple and yet effective lesson of learning how to overcome trials and challenges. And Scallion plays this archetypal character that has to go through these challenges as the underdog, who has to overcome the impossible, which you can see is a great homage to the classic 80s sports films like Rocky or The Karate Kid, especially since you're dealing with the elements of martial arts. This was my first exposure to one of those classic character arcs that show you the protagonist starts as a character who doesn't care for much except to joke around, and to not take anything seriously. But then, at the end, you see him learn not only how to persevere, but why we persevere. God asks us to do hard things and gives us the strength to follow through in the end. And this episode captures that message perfectly. I kid you not, every time I see the training montage, I just want to do 100 push-ups. I get so hyped, it's crazy. That just goes to the editing and of course this awesome soundtrack. Fun fact, when I was in middle school, I literally excused myself to go to the bathroom so I could turn this montage music on and do crunches in my spare time. That's how much I loved this music. Overall, this show is just awesome and it really shows so many elements of perseverance in each segment. Whether it's done more so for comedy like Going Up, or if it's done with more seriousness like in the Sumo segment. Even in more abstract elements like the story of St. Patrick. There was a lot that this guy had to endure. And through his time as a young boy, he still persevered through all of it by being close to God. All for the purpose of sharing the gospel. Now that I think about it, if that's not perseverance, I don't know what is. Even this silly song has some of the message in it. Larry gets so gassed at the end of the song when he sings about vocabulary, he pushed through it to the end still. I think he's the real MVP of the show, honestly. We cut back to the countertop where Bob and Larry reunite beside QWERTY, and wrap it up with the What Have We Learned song in a Sumo rendition. That's really cool. I really hope this doesn't lead to a jump scare. Oh my gosh. Okay, I don't know why that was the scariest sounding malfunction ever, but hopefully that was it for the jump scare.
Sorry,
Oh my gosh, that's Lutfy. This entity will never stop haunting me.
Lutfy fits into tiny places.
It will always live rent-free in my nightmares. I'm always gonna have to check my closet for the rest of my life. This little green thing is the epitome of... Anyway, that's why Sumo of the Opera is amazing.